My name is Olivia Hart, and I need to tell you about the night I sat at my fiancé's family dinner table, played the role of the unsophisticated small-town girl they expected, and quietly watched as they revealed exactly who they were when they thought they held all the power. This is a story about assumptions, about the masks we wear, about what happens when people judge your worth based on surface appearances, and about the moment when carefully maintained illusions come crashing down in the most satisfying way imaginable. If you want to know what happened when I finally revealed the truth and how one dinner changed everything about their perception of me, hit that like button and subscribe now. Comment below about a time you were completely underestimated. This story will leave you speechless. Let's begin. I met James Thornton 2 years ago when we were both 30. He was visiting the small coastal town in Maine where I'd grown up, staying at the boutique inn my family owned, writing a novel he claimed he'd been working on for 5 years. I was home helping my mother run the inn after my father had passed away the previous year, taking a break from my life in Boston to deal with grief and figure out my next steps. James and I connected over early morning coffee on the inn's wraparound porch, discussing books and philosophy and the appeal of small-town life versus city ambitions. He was charming and thoughtful, genuinely interested in my perspectives, despite coming from a completely different world. He told me about growing up in Connecticut wealth, about the pressure to follow his father into finance, about his rebellion of choosing to write instead. I told him about growing up in a Maine fishing village, about the inn that had been in my family for 3 generations, about the simplicity and beauty of a life connected to the ocean and seasons. What I didn't tell him, what I'd learned to keep private after years of dealing with people's changed behavior once they learned the truth, was that my family's little inn was actually a highly exclusive property that catered to celebrities and billionaires seeking privacy, charging rates that rivaled the finest hotels in the world. I didn't mention that my late father had been a brilliant investor who'd turned the inn's profits into a real estate empire spanning the Northeast. I didn't explain that the simple life I described living was actually a deliberate choice, funded by a trust fund worth over $50 million. I'd learned early that revealing wealth changed how people saw you. They either wanted something from you or judged you for having privilege, and genuine connection became nearly impossible. So I'd developed a habit of presenting myself simply, dressing casually, downplaying my background, and letting people make their own assumptions. It was easier than dealing with the complications that money introduced into relationships. James and I dated long distance for a year after his visit ended, him in Connecticut, and me eventually returning to Boston where I ran a small art gallery I'd purchased with my trust fund, but told people I managed for an investor. Our relationship was built on what felt like genuine connection, shared interests, and compatible values. James appreciated what he thought was my grounded, unpretentious nature, so different from the women in his usual social circle. I appreciated his kindness and intellect, and the fact that he'd chosen creative work over the expectations of his wealthy family. When James proposed during a weekend in Portland, overlooking the harbor at sunset, it was simple and heartfelt. We decided on a year-long engagement to plan our wedding and merge our lives. That's when James said it was time for me to meet his family. "I should warn you," James said as we planned the dinner. "My family can be intense. My mother especially. She has very particular ideas about who I should marry, and you're not exactly what she had in mind." "What does she have in mind?" I asked. "Someone from her world. Old money, finishing schools, society connections. She's had several candidates she's thrown at me over the years." When I told her I was engaged to someone I met at a small inn in Maine, I could hear her heart breaking over the phone. "And your father? He'll judge you based on your understanding of markets and finance. He thinks everyone should care about portfolio diversification and market trends. If you can't discuss the Fed's interest rate policies, he'll write you off as frivolous." "Sounds delightful," I said dryly. "I love them," James said, "but I'm not blind to their flaws. They're snobs, frankly. They value the wrong things. But they're my family, and I'm hoping they'll see what I see in you even if you don't come from their expected background." I made a decision then, similar to ones I'd made before in my life. I would go to this dinner as the person they expected to see, the simple small-town girl with no understanding of their world. I would watch how they treated someone they perceived as beneath them, And only after I'd seen their true characters would I decide what, if anything, to reveal about my actual background. The Thornton family home was in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling estate that had been in the family for 4 generations. As James drove through the gates and up the long tree-lined drive, I could see the mansion emerging from the landscape. Federal-style architecture, probably 8,000 square feet, immaculately maintained grounds. It was impressive, but not extraordinary by the standards I was accustomed to in my business dealings. I dressed carefully for this performance. Instead of the designer clothes I typically wore to gallery openings or business meetings, I'd chosen a simple cotton dress from a mid-range department store. Conservative but unstylish. I wore minimal makeup and pulled my hair into a basic ponytail. I'd left my jewelry at home except for small pearl studs. I looked exactly like what they'd expect. A girl from a small town doing her best to dress up for an important occasion, but not quite understanding what dressing up meant in their world. James's mother, Patricia Thornton, greeted us at the door. She was elegant in that way that only comes from generations of wealth and careful cultivation. Perfectly styled silver hair, Chanel suit, pearls that were definitely real and probably worth more than most people's cars. Her smile was polite and empty as she looked me over, and I saw her eyes briefly pause on my department store dress with barely concealed disappointment. "Olivia," she said, her voice pleasant but cool. "How lovely to finally meet you. James has been so secretive about you." "It's wonderful to meet you too, Mrs. Thornton," I said, deliberately making my voice slightly uncertain and overly eager. "Thank you so much for having me in your beautiful home." "Oh, please call me Patricia," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't actually want that level of familiarity. "Come in. The family is gathering in the library." The family was substantial. James's father, Richard, his older brother, Michael, with wife Vanessa, his younger sister, Caroline, with her fiancé, Preston, and his grandmother, Eleanor, who sat in a wing chair by the fireplace like a matriarch surveying her kingdom. They were all impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having questioned one's place in the social hierarchy. Introductions were made, and I felt their collective assessment like a physical weight. Richard's handshake was perfunctory, his eyes already dismissing me. Michael and Vanessa exchanged a glance that clearly communicated their judgment. Caroline's smile was sympathetic in that patronizing way that's somehow worse than open hostility. Preston barely acknowledged me at all. Only grandmother Eleanor seemed genuinely curious, studying me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So, Olivia," Patricia said as we settled into our seats with pre-dinner drinks, "James tells us you're from Maine. How quaint. What do your parents do?" "My mother runs a small inn," I said, which was technically true, though spectacularly incomplete. "My father passed away last year." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Patricia said with practiced sympathy. "Running an inn must be quite demanding. I imagine it's difficult to make ends meet in such a seasonal business." "We manage," I said simply, letting her assume we were just scraping by. "And what about you?" Richard asked, jumping in with his assessment. "What do you do for work?" "I work at an art gallery in Boston," I said. Again, technically true. "I help manage exhibitions and work with clients." "A gallery assistant?" Michael said, and I could hear the condescension in his tone. "That's nice. I'm sure it's fulfilling even if it doesn't pay much." I just nodded, playing the role of someone who didn't recognize the insult. "James tells us you didn't attend college," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Was that a financial decision, or—" "I had attended Wellesley and had an MBA from Harvard Business School, but they didn't need to know that yet. I wanted to help my family with the inn," I said. It seemed more important than school at the time. I saw them all exchange glances, the kind of meaningful looks that communicated volumes about what they thought of someone who'd chosen family obligation over education, someone who lacked the sophistication and credentials they valued. Caroline took a different approach. "It must be such a change for you being in James's world. All of this," she gestured vaguely at the opulent library, "must seem overwhelming." "It's certainly different from what I'm used to," I admitted, deliberately widening my eyes slightly as if I were genuinely intimidated. "Everything is so grand. You'll get used to it," Preston said dismissively. "James has always been drawn to unconventional choices." The message was clear. I was an unconventional choice, and not in a flattering way. Grandmother Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice sharp and clear despite her age. "Tell me, Olivia, what do you and James talk about? What interests do you share?" "Books, mostly," I said. "James is writing a novel and I love to read. We spend hours discussing stories and ideas." "How sweet," Eleanor said, and I couldn't tell if she was being genuine or mocking. "And what do you read? Romance novels, I suppose?" "Actually, I love 19th century literature," I said truthfully. "George Eliot, the Brontes, Dickens. I just finished rereading Middlemarch." That got her attention. "Middlemarch? That's quite ambitious. What did you think of Dorothea's choices?" We had a genuine conversation about the novel for several minutes, discussing themes and character motivations, and I saw Eleanor's assessment of me shift slightly. But the rest of the family seemed uncomfortable with this display of intellectual engagement from someone they'd already categorized as simple and uneducated. Dinner was announced, and we moved to a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20. The place settings were museum-quality antique china and silver. The wine was clearly expensive, and everything was designed to impress and intimidate. Throughout dinner, the family continued their assessment, each approaching it from different angles. Richard tried to engage me in conversation about finance. "Do you follow the markets at all, Olivia? Keep track of your investments?" "I don't really have investments," I said, which was a spectacular lie given that I had a diversified portfolio worth tens of millions across stocks, bonds, real estate, and alternative investments. "I have a small savings account." Richard made a dismissive sound. "That's unfortunate. Understanding financial markets is crucial in today's world. James, you'll need to help educate Olivia about these matters." "I'm sure Olivia is intelligent enough to learn," James said, coming to my defense but in a way that still accepted the premise that I needed educating. Patricia took another approach. "Olivia, when you think about your future with James, what kind of life do you envision? Have you thought about where you'll live, how you'll maintain a household appropriate to James's family?" "I haven't thought much beyond being together," I said honestly. "The specifics don't matter as much as the partnership." "But the specifics do matter," Patricia insisted. "James comes from a certain background, with certain expectations. There are social obligations, charity events, family traditions that need to be maintained. Do you feel prepared to take on those responsibilities?" "I'll do my best to learn," I said meekly. Michael jumped in with barely concealed aggression. "James, I hope you're having a prenuptial agreement drawn up. Given the disparity in your backgrounds, it's only prudent." "We haven't discussed that," James said uncomfortably. "Well, you should," Michael pressed. "Family assets need to be protected. No offense to Olivia, but marriage is as much a financial contract as an emotional one." "None taken," I murmured, though internally I was cataloging every insult for future reference. Vanessa tried a more subtle approach. "Olivia, I'm sure you understand that joining this family means joining a certain social circle. There are expectations about behavior, dress, social graces. Are you confident you can adapt to that environment?" "I'll do my best," I said again, maintaining my performance of uncertain humility. Caroline shared a story about running into an ex-girlfriend of James's at a recent charity gala. "You remember Sloane, don't you, James? She was asking about you. She just made partner at her father's law firm. Such an accomplished woman. And she looked absolutely stunning in Oscar de la Renta." The comparison was obvious and cruel. Sloane from the law firm in Oscar de la Renta versus Olivia from the main inn in her department store dress. Throughout all of this, I stayed quiet and observant, playing the role of the overwhelmed girl out of her depth. I watched James grow increasingly uncomfortable and defensive on my behalf. I watched his family reveal exactly who they were when they thought they were dealing with someone powerless and unsophisticated. Preston shared his thoughts on what appropriate work looked like for someone in their social circle. Board positions at family companies, volunteer work with prestigious charities, perhaps operating a boutique business that was more hobby than serious enterprise. "Working as a gallery assistant doesn't really fit the profile," he said bluntly. "You'll probably want to find something more appropriate once you're married." Grandmother Eleanor was the only one who seemed to see through the performance, at least partially. She kept studying me with those sharp eyes, asking questions that probed deeper than surface assumptions. She asked about the inn's history, about the area of Maine where I grew up, about how I'd come to love 19th century literature without formal education. Her questions suggested she suspected there was more to me than I was showing, but she didn't push it openly. Over dessert, Patricia delivered what she clearly thought was the decisive message. Olivia, I want to be frank with you because I think honesty is important. You seem like a lovely person, but I have serious concerns about this match. You come from such a different world than James. You don't share his educational background, his social connections, his understanding of how our world works. I worry that you'll struggle to fit into his life, and that ultimately both of you will be unhappy because of those differences. Mother, James said sharply, that's completely inappropriate. I'm simply being honest, Patricia said calmly. Surely Olivia must have concerns of her own about fitting into our family. It's better to acknowledge these challenges now than to discover them after marriage. All eyes turned to me, waiting to see how the simple small-town girl would respond to this direct challenge. I took a sip of wine, gathered my thoughts, and decided it was time to shift the dynamics of this dinner. You're absolutely right that we come from different worlds, I said, my voice changing from uncertain to clear and confident. But I'm not sure you understand exactly what those differences are. Something in my tone made the room go quiet. My family's inn that you've been dismissing as a quaint little struggling business, I continued. It's actually one of the most exclusive properties in New England. We host celebrities, CEOs, and heads of state who pay between $5,000 and $15,000 per night for privacy and luxury service. The inn's annual revenue is in the millions. I saw Patricia's face begin to change. My father, who you assumed was just a simple innkeeper, was actually a brilliant investor who built a real estate portfolio worth over $300 million before he died. The small savings account I mentioned? That's my trust fund, currently valued at approximately $50 million, not including my share of the family business and properties. Richard's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The art gallery where I work as an assistant. I own it. I purchased it 5 years ago for $12 million. It's one of the most respected contemporary art galleries in Boston, and last year our sales exceeded $20 million. Michael and Vanessa were staring at me with identical expressions of shock. As for my education, I graduated summa cum laude from Wellesley and have an MBA from Harvard Business School, where I wrote my thesis on sustainable investment strategies in emerging markets. Caroline's mouth was literally hanging open. So when you talk about social circles and appropriate behavior and family assets needing protection, I want you to understand something very clearly. I don't need James's money. I don't need his family's social connections. I don't need to learn how to fit into your world because I already operate in circles you don't even have access to. The silence at the table was absolute. I dressed down tonight and played the role of the naive small-town girl because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought you had power over me. And you showed me. Every single one of you except possibly Eleanor. I nodded at the grandmother, who was now watching me with something that looked like approval. Treated me with condescension and contempt because you thought I was poor and unsophisticated. You questioned my worth based on my clothes and my job title and your assumptions about my background. Patricia had gone pale. We didn't. If you had known, you would have treated me completely differently, I interrupted, which proves that your respect isn't based on character or compatibility or who someone actually is. It's based entirely on wealth and status and superficial markers of success. This is quite the revelation, Richard said slowly, clearly trying to recalibrate. Had we known about your background, you would have fawned over me instead of insulting me, but I would have been exactly the same person. The only thing that would have changed was your perception of my bank account. I turned to James, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been awe. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about my financial situation sooner. I should have been honest before we got engaged, but I wanted to build our relationship on who we really are, not on money or status or any of these surface things your family clearly values so much. You're a multi-millionaire, James said slowly. And you've been living like someone who doesn't define herself by her bank account. Yes, the money is there and I use it for things that matter. Supporting artists, investing in sustainable businesses, maintaining my family's legacy. But it doesn't define who I am or how I live day to day. Preston found his voice. This is extraordinary. The Hart family fortune. I should have made the connection. Your father was Michael Hart, the real estate developer. The innkeeper and real estate developer, I corrected. He never stopped running the inn even when he could have afforded to do nothing but manage his investments. Because the inn was about legacy and family and connection to place, not about money. I don't understand, Caroline said. If you have all this money, why pretend to be poor? I finished for her. Because I wanted to see how you treated someone you perceived as beneath you, and you showed me exactly who you are. Every comment about appropriate work and educational background and fitting into your world, all of it was based on your assumptions about class and money. Grandmother Eleanor laughed suddenly, a sharp bark of genuine amusement. Well played, young lady. Very well played. They absolutely deserved this. Mother, Patricia protested. Oh, don't mother me, Eleanor said. You've all been insufferable tonight, and Olivia is absolutely right to call you out on it. You treated her abominably because you thought she was poor, and now you're scrambling because you've discovered she has more money than our entire family combined. That's not entirely fair, Michael tried to defend. Isn't it? I challenged. Tell me honestly, if I'd walked in tonight in designer clothes and told you about my Harvard MBA and my gallery and my trust fund, would you have questioned whether I was appropriate for James? Would you have suggested prenuptial agreements and worried about me fitting into your social circle? No one could answer honestly, because we all knew the truth. The rest of the dinner was spectacularly awkward. The family tried desperately to backtrack, to reframe their earlier comments, to suddenly see value in all the things they'd dismissed. Patricia suggested we start fresh. Richard wanted to discuss investment strategies. Michael tried to establish business connections. Caroline attempted to engage me in conversation about art and culture she'd previously implied I couldn't understand. I remained polite but distant, making it clear that their sudden change in attitude only confirmed everything I'd observed about their values and priorities. James was quiet, processing not just the revelation about my wealth, but the stark exposure of his family's true characters. In the car afterward, he was silent for a long time before finally speaking. I don't know whether to be angry that you deceived me or impressed by the way you handled them. You can be both, I said. I should have told you about my background sooner. That was wrong of me, but I'm not sorry about letting them show who they really are. They were horrible to you. Yes, they would have been completely different if they'd known about your money from the start. Yes. Which means their respect is entirely conditional on wealth and status. It appears so. James pulled the car over and turned to face me. Why didn't you tell me? About any of it? Because I wanted to know if you loved Olivia the person or Olivia the heiress. I wanted to build something real that wasn't complicated by money and expectations. And I wanted to know what your family was really like before I married into it. You don't trust easily, he observed. I've learned not to. Money changes how people see you. It changes relationships. I wanted us to have something genuine first. And do we? Is what we built genuine if it was built on you hiding a fundamental part of your life? That was the question I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. That's something we need to figure out. But I do know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with whether I have money or you have money, or what our respective families think about any of it. Over the following weeks, James and I had to navigate a completely different dynamic. He struggled with the revelation that his simple small-town fiancé was actually wealthier than his family, that she'd been quietly assessing him and his relatives, that their entire relationship had been built with her knowing more than he did. It was a difficult adjustment. His family, meanwhile, went through a complete transformation in their attitude toward me. Patricia started calling regularly, suggesting lunch dates and shopping trips. Richard wanted to discuss investment opportunities. Michael proposed business partnerships. Caroline invited me to exclusive charity events and tried to introduce me to her social circle. I maintained careful distance from all of it. Their sudden acceptance was as hollow as their earlier rejection, both based on the same shallow values of money and status, rather than on any genuine evaluation of my character or compatibility with James. The situation came to a head about 2 months after that first dinner. James's family was hosting a large charity gala and assumed I'd not only attend but make a significant donation given my newly revealed wealth. Patricia called to discuss what I'd be donating and which of their wealthy friends I'd like to meet at the event. I'm not attending, I told her simply. What do you mean? This is one of the most important events of our social calendar. I'm sure it is, but I don't want to attend, and I'm not going to donate to this particular charity. Why not? Do you have something against cancer research? Not at all. But I've researched your charity, and only about 30% of donations actually go to research. The rest goes to administrative costs and event expenses. There are much more efficient organizations doing similar work where 80 or 90% of donations go directly to research. But this is the charity our family supports. This is where people in our circle donate. Then people in your circle are wasting their money on inefficient giving. I prefer to donate to organizations that actually maximize impact rather than organizations that maximize social visibility. You're being deliberately difficult, Patricia accused. I'm being deliberate about how I use my resources, I corrected. My money is mine to do with as I choose, and I choose to use it for purposes beyond buying social status or impressing your friends. Patricia tried various tactics: guilt about family obligation, suggestions that I was embarrassing James, implications that I didn't understand how their world worked. When none of that succeeded, she finally said, "You know, I thought once we understood your background, we could welcome you into the family properly. But you're not making that easy. You mean now that you know I'm rich, you expected me to act the way you think rich people should act, attend the right parties, support the right charities, buy the right clothes, impress the right people. But that's not who I am, regardless of my bank account. Then what's the point of having money if you're going to act like you don't?" It was the same question Caroline had asked, and it revealed so much about how they viewed wealth. The point is that money is a tool, not an identity. I use it to support causes I carefully research and believe in. I use it to maintain my family's business and legacy. I use it to have freedom to live according to my values. I don't use it to buy status or impress people, or gain entry to social circles I don't actually care about. The wedding planning process revealed even more fundamental incompatibilities. The Thorntons assumed we'd have a large society wedding, something that would be covered in social pages and attended by hundreds of wealthy and influential people. When James and I insisted on the modest ceremony we'd always planned, close friends and family in a small venue in Maine, they were horrified. "But this is a union of two prominent families," Patricia protested. "People will expect a proper celebration." "We're not two prominent families," I said. "We're two people who love each other and want to get married surrounded by people who genuinely care about us, not by people who want to be seen at the right events. You're embarrassing yourself and James by being so provincial about this. Or we're being authentic about what actually matters to us." The breaking point came about 4 months before our planned wedding. James came to me after a difficult conversation with his parents and said, "They're never going to accept you." "I know. Not because you're not good enough for me, but because you refuse to play the games they think are important. You won't attend the right parties or donate to the right charities or live the way they think someone with your wealth should live." That's accurate. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if maybe they're right that we're too different. Not in the ways they think, but maybe we do have different values about how to live, what matters, how to use the resources we have. Maybe we do, I agreed quietly. James sat down heavily. "I love you, but I'm not sure that's enough anymore. This whole situation, the deception about your background, the way you deliberately misled my family, the constant conflict about how we should live and what obligations we have, it's exhausting. I know. Do you want to marry me? Actually marry me and build a life together? Or did you just want to prove something to my family and to yourself?" It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. "I wanted both," I admitted. "I wanted to build something real with you, and I wanted to see if your family valued character over status. I accomplished the second goal, but maybe damaged the first one in the process. We postponed the wedding indefinitely while we figured out whether our relationship could survive the revelations and conflicts. We went to couples counseling, had long, difficult conversations about values and expectations and what we each wanted from life and marriage. Eventually, we came to a painful conclusion. We loved each other, but we had different visions for how to live. James, despite his creative aspirations and rejection of his father's finance career, still valued many aspects of his family's lifestyle and social position. He wanted to be part of that world, even if he approached it differently than his parents did. He wanted children who grew up in that environment, with those connections and opportunities. I didn't. I wanted a life focused on purpose and authenticity, using resources for impact rather than status, building something meaningful rather than impressive. The wealth I had was a tool for freedom and contribution, not a ticket to a lifestyle James still wanted, at least partly. We ended our engagement a year after that first disastrous family dinner. It was sad, but ultimately right. We'd built something genuine in many ways, but the deceptions and revelations had exposed fundamental incompatibilities that love alone couldn't overcome. Looking back now, 2 years later, I have mixed feelings about the night I deliberately played the naive poor girl at my fiancé's family dinner. The manipulation bothers me. I essentially set them up to reveal their worst characteristics by deceiving them about who I was. That wasn't entirely fair or ethical, even if it was revealing. But I don't regret learning the truth about the Thorntons before permanently joining that family. They valued wealth and status above character and compatibility. They treated someone they perceived as beneath them with condescension and cruelty. They only offered respect once they learned about my bank account, which proved their respect was entirely conditional. Those were important things to know. And the experiment revealed something equally important about James, that despite his professed rejection of his family's values, he still wanted significant parts of the lifestyle and social position they represented. That incompatibility would have destroyed our marriage eventually. The situation taught me important lessons about transparency in relationships. While I still believe in not leading with wealth when building connections, I learned that complete deception isn't fair either. There's a difference between not advertising your financial status and actively misleading someone about fundamental aspects of your life. I've become more direct in subsequent relationships about my background, sharing that information earlier while still making clear that it doesn't define who I am or what I value. It's a difficult balance, but it's more honest than the performance I conducted with James and his family. The Thorntons probably tell a very different version of this story, about the gold digger who pretended to be poor to trap their son, then revealed her wealth to humiliate them, then broke James's heart by refusing to join their family. That narrative is convenient for them and avoids examining their own behavior and values. But I know what actually happened. I know they revealed their true characters when they thought they had power over me. I know their respect was entirely conditional on wealth rather than based on any genuine evaluation of character or compatibility. And I know that their values, the importance of status over substance, of social position over authentic connection, of impressive consumption over meaningful contribution, were incompatible with how I wanted to live my life. The night I played the naive girl and let them think I was poor and unsophisticated, I gave them every opportunity to treat me with basic human respect and dignity. They chose condescension and cruelty instead. That choice revealed everything I needed to know about who they were and whether I wanted to join that family. The money I controlled wasn't the point, really. The point was that I had value as a person regardless of my bank account. But the Thorntons couldn't see that until wealth made them look. And by the time they learned the truth and adjusted their attitudes, I'd already seen who they really were beneath the practiced politeness and social graces. Sometimes the most important information you can gather about people is how they treat those they perceive as powerless. The Thorntons failed that test spectacularly. And while the relationship with James ultimately didn't survive the revelations and complications, I'm grateful I learned those truths before making a permanent legal and emotional commitment to that family. The balance of power didn't shift because I revealed my wealth. It shifted because I finally stopped performing the role they expected and showed them who I actually was. In doing so, I forced them to confront their own values and assumptions. Most of them failed that confrontation, unable to examine why they'd treated someone so poorly based on nothing but assumptions about class and money. But Grandmother Eleanor sent me a letter a few months after James and I ended our engagement. In it, she wrote, "You were right about my family. They value all the wrong things. But I hope you'll remember that testing people by deceiving them also says something about your own values and what you prioritize. Both things can be true. They failed your test, And the test itself was perhaps not entirely fair. I hope you'll consider that in your future relationships. She was right. Both things were true. The Thorntons revealed their shallowness and conditional respect, and I revealed my own willingness to manipulate and deceive in service of gathering information. Neither of us came away from that dinner looking entirely good, but I did come away with clarity about who they were, what James wanted, and whether I could build a life in that world. And that clarity, however painfully obtained, was worth far more than any performance of fitting into a family whose values I didn't share. The money I controlled gave me freedom. Freedom to test people without fearing the consequences. Freedom to walk away from situations that didn't align with my values. Freedom to live authentically even when that authenticity cost me relationships. That freedom is the real power of wealth, far more than the social status or material consumption the Thorntons valued. And in the end, that's what they never understood, and what I tried and failed to help James see. Money's real value isn't in impressing people or buying status. It's in having the freedom to live according to your values, to contribute to causes that matter, to build something meaningful rather than something impressive. The Thorntons had money but were enslaved by social expectations and the need for status. I had money and used it for freedom. That night at dinner, playing the naive girl while they revealed their true characters, I was quietly demonstrating what actual power looks like. Not the power to impress or intimidate, but the power to observe clearly, judge accurately, and make choices aligned with values rather than obligations. They never suspected the money, because they couldn't imagine someone with wealth choosing simplicity and authenticity over status and performance. That failure of imagination told me everything I needed to know about whether I belonged in their world. I didn't. And while ending the engagement was painful, staying in it would have been worse. Sometimes the most important thing money can buy is the freedom to walk away from people and situations that would diminish who you are. That's the real lesson from the night I played naive at my fiancé's family dinner. Not that I controlled millions they never suspected, but that those millions gave me the power to choose authenticity over acceptance, values over status, and truth over comfortable deception. And in the end, that's worth far more than any family's approval or any social circle's acceptance could ever be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or judged based on appearances, smash that like button and subscribe. Share with someone who knows their worth regardless of others' opinions. Comment about a time people's assumptions about you were completely wrong. Remember that your value has nothing to do with your bank account. That character matters infinitely more than status, and that sometimes the greatest power is the freedom to walk away from people who can't see your worth.